Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Arthur Vaughn, and I'm the Health and Wellness Chairman for the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta. Education is one of our 4 pillars within the 100 Black Men of America. Our pillars are education, mentoring, health and wellness, and economic development. And as you can imagine, education touches all 4 of our pillars in one way or another. So this evening, we wanted to hold the first of 2 candidate forums for state school superintendent. We will be hosting another one next Thursday at the same time for our Republican candidates. So we have tonight Ms. Currey Hitchens. Pronounce your first name right?
Yes, you got it right. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Jaha Howard. Mr. Morrow may be joining us, and Mrs. Alisha Searcy. All right, and our format for this evening will begin with, I have a set of questions, 4 or 5 questions that we'll ask each candidate, and we reviewed the process with the candidates prior to now. We will do it in alphabetical order by last name, and then reverse alphabetical order for the second question, and we'll continue that process. We also want to hear from you. So when you have questions, if you would please place them in the chat, and after the determined questions are done, then we will absolutely go to your questions in our chat box. Again, thank you on behalf of the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta. Our first question, and we'll start again with Ms. Hitchens. Ms. Hitchens, why do you want to be Georgia State School Superintendent, not Georgia State University, but the state of Georgia School Superintendent, and why?
Well, first I want to say thank you so much for having me this evening, Dr. Vaughn and the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta. It's very nice to be here. And I want to be the next superintendent of schools in Georgia for many reasons, but a lot of them have to do with my previous work in education. I did a lot of work as a student advocate in education, advocating for kids to try to keep them out of the school to prison pipeline that in Georgia, as you probably are aware, is especially terrible. It's like twice as likely that kids who are Black and kids who have disabilities will go into that pipeline, will be suspended from school. It happens more often, twice as often to those groups of kids. So I represented mostly kids who had disabilities and a lot of kids who were Black in school cases to try to keep them out of that school to prison pipeline in school discipline cases. And also for some of them, if they were disabled, to get them services for kids who were disabled that were appropriate to keep them in school with a free and appropriate public education. I still do that, actually. I had to quit my job at Legal Aid to run, but I continue to keep my cases because you can't just drop cases, especially when there's no one else that can do those education cases. So no one else in my unit really did that work. So I took those cases with me. So I'm still doing that work right now as a pro bono volunteer attorney. And that's why I saw what's happening to kids. So it's all of those cases. And then also, in addition, all these terrible laws for coming down the pipelines in February. I jumped in the last minute, as you probably noticed if you're watching the race at all, because I kept saying to myself and other advocates for students, what else can we do about these laws that are going to make it so that teachers can't teach the truth in class, and that means students can't learn the truth in class. And that really means, especially when you look at all the laws together, that people in Georgia, not all people in Georgia, but a lot of lawmakers in Georgia are trying to keep people down and maintain white supremacy in our state because they see that education is a way to end it and to fight against racism, and that it was working. And now they're trying to maintain what they have and not give it up. And it's, in my opinion, horrifying. So that's one reason I want to fight against it. Also, there are book bans that do the same kind of work. And I'm very against book bans. I have a master's in children's literature and really want all kids to be exposed to all types of books to help every child grow and know the world around them. And so that's a few reasons, and definitely there are more. So I'm not going to go on forever. I'm sure we'll address some of the other ones as we keep going, but some things that I bring to the position that maybe no one else ever has is that I'm a person who has advocated for students very, very directly. In fact, in those school discipline cases, I have right now an appellate case and a school discipline case that's in front of the Board of Education, and I have a due process case that's in front of the Board of Education, and I have a state complaint case also. For those are two of those are for kids who have disabilities, and one is for a school discipline case. So I have those cases right now. I might be the only person who's ever run for this who's done that kind of work. But also I am a teacher advocate. I come from a family of teachers. I still have a lot of teachers in my family. I was a teacher. I guess I technically still am a teacher. I have a master's in children's literature and a teaching certification, but also have all the skills of an attorney. And I think I could really do some good work there. Very skilled at reading and understanding the law, and I think could work really well with the legislature to try to make better bills, or at least cushion the bad bills that just passed with policy at the Department of Education.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Vaughn.
Dr. Howard, the same question.
I'll take this bus.
Why do you want to be school superintendent? And what do you bring to the table? And if everybody would please put their devices on mute so we can hear the candidates clearly.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with an amazing panel. Ladies, a pleasure to see you again. Thank you to the 100 Black men for the work that you continue to do. Bring you greetings from, right now I'm in Athens, Georgia. So Lord knows we're in a special state where you can be in Sparta, you can be in Rome, you can be in Athens, Cairo, also some people say Cairo, and still be in the state of Georgia. So it's a blessing to be able to travel and meet some wonderful people. We're here because we have a lack of leadership in the state of Georgia when it comes to public education. And I'm somebody like many of you, when you're here to do the work and then you find yourself doing the work and you realize there's some leadership and there's some policy that's happening and you're not okay with it. And we decided to do something about it. It's the same reason why we organize communities in our area in Cobb County. It's the same reason why we ran for office years ago. And we do that together with an approach that doesn't center just me as one person, but as a community, the voices of an entire state in this case. So I'm happy to be able to provide leadership. I'm happy to be able to provide perspective and do it with excellence and do it with compassion. It's the same approach that we use in my pediatric dental office as an 11-year business owner. I'm a husband of almost 15 years and we celebrate in a couple of months. So shout out to my wife, Vanessa, 3 children in our schools in 5th, 3rd, and 1st grade in our public schools. I'm here as a dad. I'm here as a community organizer. I'm here as a man of faith. I'm here, just like many of you, to be a part of the solution. So I'm just happy to be here. We know that we're the right fit for the job, and we all learned a whole lot, especially over the last couple of years. COVID has kind of put us on blast, so to speak, right? It has shown us who we are with no Photoshop, no makeup. It's just raw image. And we realize that we have to work harder, not to go back to an old way, but to move forward with a new vision forward. So thank you again, and I look forward to this discussion.
Outstanding. Mrs. Thomas Searcy, the same question. Why do you want to be school superintendent, and what do you bring to the table?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Vaughn and the 100 Black Men of Metro Atlanta for having us. It is an important time, I think, in our history. My name is Alisha Thomas Searcy, formerly Alisha Thomas Morgan. Many people remember I am the first African-American elected to the Georgia House of Representatives from Cobb County. And I had the privilege of serving in the House for 12 years, 6 terms. Most of that time I spent working on education policy. Some of those bills turned into laws that I authored and worked directly with the Department of Education to promulgate those rules and make sure that the proper guidance was given to school districts. Prior, of course, to being elected the first African-American to the Georgia House of Representatives, I attended Spelman College, where I was a leader in the NAACP and worked again on youth issues and juvenile justice issues. When I left the legislature in 2014, I returned back to school and earned a master's degree in education leadership. I also participated in an 18-month intensive superintendent's training and earned a superintendent certificate from the state of Georgia. I am a former superintendent of an all-girls schools network in the Metro Atlanta area. When I arrived at those schools, our elementary school had a 43 CCRPI score. That's the state index that is used to measure school performance. When I left 3 years later, that same elementary school had an 85. Our teacher retention rate was 25%, and when I left, it was 75%. And so I have a track record of success in public education, of leading schools, leading a district, hiring principals, turning around the teacher retention rate. And of course, I have extensive experience as a state representative, working on the House Appropriations Committee, working on the Education Committee. I had a leadership position there. And as I said, working with the Department of Education. And so to those who are viewing, I had enjoyed the last 8 years not being in politics. I think it's become very divisive and ugly, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But as a mom of 3 school-aged children, my passion for education and my desire to change things in our public education system is greater than my dislike for politics. And so I found myself deciding to run for state school superintendent because we have to have a superintendent who has experience making policy at the state level. We have to have a state superintendent who has experience running a school district. As an educator, I can tell you that it's time out for top-down decision-making. People who don't understand education, who haven't led schools, making decisions for teachers who are on the front lines. And so I'm running to be a champion for teachers, for students, for parents, to make sure that the schools that our children go to reflect the world that we live in. The last thing that I will say is that my mother and 15-year-old daughter had a discussion a few weeks ago about what public education looked like when my mom was in school. And as my mom decided, as she was describing what school looked like, it very much looks the same in 2022. In fact, if you look at a picture of what school looked like in the 1700s, it looks very much like 2022. And so the question that I ponder and I ask everyone that's watching today, how is it that we are providing a telegram education to a TikTok generation? So it is my hope and my vision to create and reimagine a public education system in Georgia that is relevant, that fits the needs of our students, where parents feel empowered and included in our schools, where teachers feel supported and respected, and that every decision that we make on behalf of children about education is about children. I want us to lead the country in a public school system that works for all children. And so I'm running because this is personal to me. I don't have 10 or 15 years to let the education system get better for others to try to do it. I only have right now. And so I'm running because I'm experienced, I'm passionate, I have great ideas, I'm a visionary, and I think most importantly, I have a track record, and we don't have time for on-the-job training.
Outstanding. Thank you, all 3 of you, for attending. I believe Mr. Morrow had a conflict. He's not here, but if he is able to come, we invite him to join into the conversation. And again, thank you for all of you joining us. This is the Democratic Candidate Forum for State School Superintendent for Georgia. And my name is Dr. Arthur Vaughn. I am the Health and Wellness Chair for the 100 Black Men of North Metro. And according to the rules that we established before we began, we're going to ask each question in alphabetical order by last name, and in reverse order for the second question. Again, you're reminded you can put your questions in the chat and we will absolutely get to them after the prepared questions. So back to you, Mrs. Thomas Searcy. The next question we have is, most professionals can expect to get their work equipment for free, whereas teachers routinely pay their own money to equip their classrooms. What do you say to teachers who say they need a bigger budget to run their classes? How can you support taking the burden of paying for classroom equipment off of teachers?
He says he's ready to.
Yeah, it is a big challenge in education. And I'm sure at some point we'll talk about teachers and all the things that they need. But specific to this question, Dr. Vaughn, one of the things that I did as superintendent is I spent time listening to the teachers in our schools, and they talked about the need for resources like curricular resources, but also resources to outfit their class and make sure that they had the supplies that they needed. And so we did 2 things when I was superintendent. One is that we had a fund especially for those types of items in classrooms.
I was called to the bar to practice. I've been practicing in Atlanta for over 20 years. And with respect to the seat.
I'm sorry, I muted them.
Thank you.
Please continue. Sorry about that.
And so we had a fund that teachers could request dollars to pay for things in their classroom. We also provided each teacher with a $750 professional development budget. Because we also heard from them that they wanted to have more development and wanted to have more support. As state school superintendent, using my experiences as a local superintendent, I would make sure that we had those same kinds of resources available. I'm not one of those that believes that we don't have enough money in our public education system. I don't think there's a money problem, there's a priority problem. And in fact, if we want teachers to be able to do the best job they can absolutely do, it has to be our first priority to make sure they have the resources they need in their classrooms.
All right, outstanding. The same question to Dr. Howard. I'm going to repeat it because it was a long question, all right? A lot of education, nope, the wrong one. I even got the wrong question. Most professionals can expect to get their work equipment for free, whereas teachers routinely pay their own money to equip their classrooms. What do you say to teachers who say they need a bigger budget to run their classrooms? How can you support taking the burden of paying for classroom equipment off of teachers?
I appreciate that question, and I appreciate Alisha's answer because it's spot on. I'll just shed a little light on another perspective as well, is that when it comes to a classroom budget, we have to put it in a broader context of the amount of disrespect that our state has shown our educators. 1 minute, we call them heroes. And the next minute, they're being blamed and they're the scapegoats for all things wrong with public education. That's a problem. We need a state superintendent that's going to stand up for our educators and not use them as scapegoats. Also, we have a habit in the state of trying to buy the affection of our educators. We'll dangle a few $1,000s and say, hey, our educators are great. Here's a bonus. Here's what we promised, a couple $1,000s here, a couple of $1,000s there. And at the same time, we disrespect them by not allowing them the freedom to teach and do the thing that they are trained and able to do. So we have this broader problem of disrespecting our educators. And one of the symptoms of that very broad problem is a lack of classroom budget. And you'll see that we'll take an approach that doesn't just focus on one symptom, but I'm trained as a dental professional to look comprehensively at a problem, see how the dots connect, and make sure that the solution matches the real problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Howard. Now, Ms. Hitchens, do you need me to repeat? I can repeat it.
No, I think I got it. Thank you. I wrote it down. I was like, let me take notes on that this time. Thank you though, Dr. Vaughn. I don't want to waste everyone's time either. You're right. So I can go with what I remember. So both of you are right, of course, Jaha and Alisha. I want to really focus on increasing teachers' salaries. I know it's not exactly what the question is, but I think that's part of what is necessary to make sure teachers are respected professionals and also giving them respect to let them teach what they want to teach, let them teach the truth and not control their classrooms as much. So that would be part of what they need really to make them a more respected professional. But on the equipment side, of course, they need a larger budget and they should not be buying things on their own. I mean, unless they want to give their kids a Christmas card or something, that's different maybe, but all tools needed for learning should be provided by the schools, and teachers should not need to be paying for things. Just like you were saying, usually most businesses will get work equipment for you. So I think they do need a larger budget. And all schools do give teachers a budget. It's definitely, I mean, I was a teacher, I had a budget, but it wasn't enough. Everyone's right. I never could get everything I needed for my classroom in the budget I was allowed. So I would support them, just like Jaha and Alisha are saying, also holistically, because it's not just about the classroom budget, it's a whole lot of other things. And all of those things together are going to need to be looked at and thought about and focused on to really make sure that teachers are respected. Exactly. So it's all, we're going to do this and other things, like Jaha is saying, respected professionals that are paid equal to other professionals who have similar education levels, and then also receive everything they need for their classrooms. We do have the money. The state of Georgia has a surplus in its budget. I would want us to change our constitution to say that kids are supposed to have more than an adequate education. I'm not sure what word we want to use exactly, but let's require better education for students today. And let's make sure the teachers get all the tools they need to do that, just like an executive at a company would get. They need to get everything they need also.
All right, thank you, thank you. And based on our rules, the next question is going to go back to Ms. Hitchens.
Yeah, go ahead.
With the increase in gun and physical violence in our schools, what plans do you have to ensure all students feel safe physically and mentally while on campus and at sporting and extracurricular events?
So It's going to take a lot. Again, this is another big problem that's definitely not just a school-wide problem. Violence across the country has gone up in a lot of areas, in airports and public spaces. We hear about it all the time, honestly. So this is not just a school problem. This is going to be a community-wide, statewide, nationwide problem that we need to address together. But what the schools can do, because they have the kids have to go there, the kids have to be in school, it's mandatory. We need to make sure that we get the kids all the resources and services they need. We've all gone through a pandemic and trauma, and I know there was rising violence before that. And from the research I've done, this is also caused by a lot of different things. And we have to try to address all of those things holistically. But some of those things could be we're having too much screen time for kids because a lot of kids are having access to watching things that are violent online. And I know that's going to be hard to control, but controlling it is not exactly what I think we should do. What I think we should do is educate children, for one thing at least, about that screen time and how to make it be screen time that is healthy and screen time that will make them feel good instead of screen time that's going to make them feel bad or cause them to have more issues. So that's one piece. But then we also need to address all the trauma that's been happening from the pandemics. We need to have mental health services and more counselors instead of police officers in schools. We need services for the teachers too, because it's not just the students that have gone through a trauma. Teachers also need resources to be able to help the children and themselves with all the same kinds of issues that the children have gone through. And that's probably not even the only thing. There's so many other things. We're going to have to do a lot of research, which we have been doing some research. Like I just told you, the report on the screen time, I just read it today. So that is something that's new. Of course, we all probably kind of thought that might be related to some of the violence, but it turns out, according to the research, it is. So all of these things together, we're going to have to gather them, do all the research and figure out what is going to help students the most. And I honestly don't think it's necessarily trying to push them to catch up academically. I want them to catch up socio-emotionally. It seems like some kids went from 6th graders to 9th graders basically without actually having a middle school experience. And that's not normal for the United States and Georgia. And it can't be easy for a kid to go from that one end, 6th grade to 9th grade, basically. So I want to really pump up all of the services for kids and teachers and schools and make schools community schools so that families and students can use those buildings for many other things. I know some schools are doing that, like some schools already have clinics in them and that kind of thing, but I want to do more of that. I think we're going to have to address the whole community and not just the students to try to help with this issue.
All right, that would put Dr. Howard in the middle. So Dr. Howard, same question to you.
Yeah, I think you're talking about discipline, I believe, right?
Excuse
Did
me?
I hear the quite student discipline?
Well, no. I'm sorry.
Not
What
quite.
we're talking
I'm hearing
about
that.
is there's an increase of gun and physical violence in our schools.
Mhm.
What plans do you have to ensure all students feel safe physically and mentally while on campus and at extracurricular activities?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. It's a hot topic right now, and it has been for a while, but definitely right now. We see a pattern happening all over the state and all over the country. It reminds me of the commercial we're familiar with, a Snickers commercial that just says, you're not you when you're hungry. And all of us probably have this part of us that we're not the same people when we're hungry. I got to say that we're not ourselves when we're hurting. And we have over 1 million kids who have just experienced a pandemic like no one has ever seen. They come and they're in households where drug and alcohol use has increased, gun sales have increased. All of that has happened over the last couple of years. So our kids are not in stable environments, generally speaking. And so that makes sense that we have this explosion of violence in our schools. We want to make sure that we have an approach that doesn't just look at the explosion, but we make sure that we look at the conditions that causes the explosion. That means that we don't want to have just punitive, let's just continue locking people up and throw them away. No, we have to have, and that's why compassion is a big part of what we do. We want to make sure that we're striving for excellence and do it with compassion. Our kids are hungry. A lot of our kids are hurting. A lot of our families are stressed. Articles are coming out every other month about what's happening with the stress level. You see people just flying off the handle over the slightest insult right about now. And that's not just in school, but it's everywhere. We see it in our practice where sometimes folks are just upset about something in traffic and they're just lashing out at the next person. But the same approach that we use in our office is the same approach that we have to use in our classrooms. We have to control what we can control, which is our classrooms, our schools. We have to love on our children, love on our staff, and make sure that we're supporting one another so that we can weather this storm. Provide that stability. Even though we may not be able to create stability in someone's home, we can create stability at our school base. And we know that as our schools go, so go our communities. So I'm excited to be a part of that process. We bring a perspective that is unique for a time like this. This is a unique time, and this is the type of leadership that we bring to the table. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Mrs. Thomas Searcy, do you need me to restate the question, or are you okay?
You can restate it.
Okay. So here we go. The question is, here it is. With the increase of gun and physical violence in our schools, what plans do you have to ensure all students feel safe physically and mentally while on campus and attending extracurricular activities?
I think Jaha and Currey had some good thoughts about a holistic approach to acknowledging, what children are facing. Our babies come to school with a whole lot of challenges, whether it's hunger, violence in their communities that they live in, violence in their homes, a number of things. And of course, teachers have to take the brunt of that when they walk into those doors. But you specifically asked about plans. There are things that I think need to be in place, but first and foremost, we have to understand what the state superintendent can and cannot do. I think when it comes to matters related to safety and school violence, those are local issues that need to be handled at the local school district level. I believe that law enforcement, faith leaders, business leaders, certainly parents and students as well ought to be at the table to make decisions about what's best for a particular school or a particular district. There are all kinds of needs, whether it's urban school districts or rural school districts. And so having those solutions come from local communities are critical. Some things that the state school superintendent can do. I think we need to rewrite the job description of school counselors. If you talk to a school counselor, they will tell you that they're not doing a whole lot of counseling. What they're doing is dealing with schedules and monitoring classes and all kinds of things that are not related to providing mental health services to students. And so it is my hope that districts who have received CARES Act dollars and other federal funds are beginning to use those monies to get more social services and mental health services, not just for students, but also for teachers. Another piece of my plan is to retrain school resource officers. I cannot imagine what it is like for a child these days to go to school, especially at the middle and high school levels where there are often the presence of firearms or other dangerous weapons. And so we have to keep their safety first. So I think sometimes the presence of a school resource officer may be necessary, again, depending on the local community and what they deem is best. But we have to retrain those school resource officers to remind them that they're not in a criminal setting or a jail setting, they're in a school setting. And so those relationships are important with students. Those relationships are important with the school community, and how issues are handled matter. And it's different than when it's someone that's on the street. And so again, it's rewriting the job descriptions for counselors, it's retraining school resource officers, and it's making sure that local districts are empowered to bring together local people to help solve those issues and keep our children safe.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you. And what I'd like to do now is I want to remind you and thank you again for joining this candidate forum hosted by the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta. Again, my name is Dr. Arthur Vaughn, and I am our Health and Wellness Chair. But we also need to remind everybody we're a nonpartisan organization who cannot endorse any candidate, but we want to make sure people are informed because education is one of the 4 pillars of what we do. And we'll be hosting another one of these forums next Thursday for the Republican counterparts in this primary election. And if you don't remember, Early voting starts May 2nd, with election day being May 24th for this primary election. And I also want to let everybody know after this next question, I'm going to go look in the chat while our candidates are asking this next question to see what your questions are, because we want to make sure your voices are heard. So I'm giving you a heads up. After this, I'm going to the chat. So if you have a question, please get it in the chat now. All right, so back to you. Actually, Dr. Howard, you get to go first this time. We all know that there are other ways to make a good living besides earning a 4-year degree, which is interesting for me to say with all the paper behind my head. Or do we? Do Georgia schools do a good enough job offering and marketing vocational and career classes and apprenticeships? Or does Georgia need to make a change? We'll start with you, Dr. Howard, then go to Ms. Hitchens, and then again, no, actually, Dr. Howard, Ms. Searcy, and then we'll end with Ms. Hitchens on this question.
Yes, I really appreciate that question. I'm proud to be in a part of Cobb County that houses our basically our career academy, which we've branded differently. But when it comes to vocational and career training, we have that academy for Cobb County in my own backyard. And I just have had a pleasure of being able to be a part of the entire process of the construction and watching our children use these skills. We're talking about children that will be able to have certificates in IT, certificates in plumbing, and certificates in construction. And the thing is, it's been interesting talking to families because they think that it's one or the other. Either you're doing vocation or you're doing college, and you're going to college. We've been able to show that you don't have to just make a choice that way. You can be prepared and have all of your credentials to get ready to go to a 4-year college. And you can have credentials to work in a career, whether it's as an EMT or whether it's an IT specialist. And I'm just happy to see this right here, just front and center, and see where we're going well and where there's room for improvement. You mentioned the state of Georgia. Are we doing enough? We're doing well in pockets. We're doing well in pockets. Georgia, as we know, is the #1 place to do business. And a big part of that is our relationship with our vocational schools, career job training, and places like Augusta are just doing amazing things. Gwinnett Tech are doing amazing things, but those are pockets. What we bring to the table is to be able to collaborate those efforts, share best practices. And as state superintendent, we don't have a top-down approach where we just say, hey, this is what it's going to be, everybody. But what we can do is share ideas, make sure we're listening to one another, and show folks, this is what works here. Let's try these best practices and show how we can influence in a positive way and make sure that we have a standard that's higher towards excellence across the state. Another thing that I want to bring up, and this is very important, is that when it comes to college and careers, sometimes we talk about college with one type of inflection of our voice and a sense of pride. And then career too often is like a throw-in, as if it's a backup or not as good. We have to make sure that we are honoring the humanity and the dignity of work, of education. And when as your next state superintendent, when we talk about college and career, people are going to know that they are valued, that it matters, and that we're going to match it not only with our finances, but with how we talk about it and how we highlight those wonderful achievements.
All right, now to Ms. Thomas Searcy, the same question. I will restate it. We all know there are other ways to make a good living besides a 4-year college degree. Do Georgia schools do a good enough job of offering and marketing vocational and career classes and apprenticeships, or does Georgia need to make changes?
So I have the privilege right now of working with a nonprofit organization that works with students in Fulton and Atlanta public schools to make sure that they graduate on time and choose one of the 4 pathways: 4-year college, junior college, gainful employment, and the military. And it's been very interesting to watch this work. I'm helping to rewrite the curriculum and make sure that the curriculum for the program is really relevant for the students that we're seeking to serve. So I would say that as Jaha mentioned, there are schools and school districts that are doing a good job of exposing students to career paths, showing them the different options that are available. Even if you decide not to go to college and you want to go straight into career, there are lots of districts that are working with labor unions to do an apprenticeship program so that they're getting certificates, earning money right now. I think all of those are really important. The challenge that I have, though, is that it doesn't exist all over the state. I'm specifically concerned about rural communities. They often are left out in many of these initiatives. And so as state school superintendent, I think it's important to partner with organizations like the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia AFL-CIO, other statewide organizations that have a larger reach to, yes, share best practices, but also create partnerships. And I think it is important for a superintendent to be intentional, to set goals and say that every single district, all 180 school districts, will have a program that allows students to access one of those 4 pathways, that our curriculum is a reflection of the world that we live in now. We have brilliant young people who have already started businesses, but we're not really teaching entrepreneurship in our classrooms. We're not really teaching financial literacy in ways that is meaningful, that they can use right now. And so while there's some good work happening across the state, there's a lot more that needs to happen. And a strong superintendent who understands what's happening around the state, where we can create partnerships, and how we can reimagine public education will help us to get where we need to be so that every school district has those outstanding programs where all of those options are available to our students.
All right, Ms. Hitchens, same question to you. We all know that there are other ways to a good living besides a 4-year college degree. Do Georgia schools do a good enough job offering vocational and career classes and apprenticeships, or does Georgia need to make a change?
Thank you, Dr. Vaughn, again. I would say we need to make a change. Not that, like Jaha and Alisha both said, some places are doing a good job. We'll always think, yes.
You had frozen for a moment. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Is it better now?
At least on my screen you were. I wanted to make sure everybody heard
okay.
your answer.
Okay, I'll start over. I didn't say that much yet. But I was saying I do think we need to make a change to improve all education for vocational programs in Georgia. I remember when I was in high school in Georgia, our vocational program was in our high school. I don't know about the whole state. I know right now in my home county, Whitfield County, there's a separate school that has a vocational program. But when I was in high school, it was great because people could take just a few vocational classes if they wanted to learn something like electrical engineering and still go to college, like with the regular high school degree diploma, they could do that. And I don't know that that's as easy to do right now. It seems like it might be 2 different buildings if you're going to try to do that program, which I guess is still possible. I do know, at least in DeKalb County, where I've had some clients, that sometimes they can go like back and forth between schools, like be in a vocational program, but then come back to their home school for certain classes. That's what seems to happen maybe across the state. I think that might be okay, but I do think that something is missed when a kid goes to a different school for all of the day and then they miss out on other regular high school things. Like maybe that vocational school doesn't have sports teams experience. Am I freezing again? You're smiling at me.
A little bit.
Oh, okay.
Back.
Sorry. Well, I'm sorry, guys. But anyway, I was just saying, I want all kids to get the full high school experience and be prepared for life after high school to either be able to work right away or go to college, or maybe both. And I don't think that's necessarily happening in Georgia right now. And I do think that working with unions like AFL-CIO and any other union, even the teachers unions, might help us to prepare students. Some of them will go to college, of course, like GAE is the Georgia Association of Educators. But still, working with unions will help kids to be able to gain the skills that they will need after college and after high school, and to know exactly what their next path is or next steps are. And I do know, like I have a friend who was in rural Georgia who did, I think, a welding program in high school, and that's what he's going to do, it sounds like, after high school. And I think that sounds great, and I'm going to celebrate that, because like Jaha said earlier, a lot of times people say, oh, he's not going to college, like that's a bad thing. But it's not a bad thing, because honestly, like starting your living, making money, starting your family, doing that is another way of living. And not everyone has to go to school, has to continue going to school, continue to go to college. Right now, even since college is not free, it might be a bad decision for some kids to go to college, because what if they aren't really prepared and that wasn't really what was really going to work best for them, and then they end up in debt. So honestly, going into a vocational school and then learning a skill might be what's best for a lot of kids.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I saw that our president of the North Metro chapter of the 100 Black Men has joined us, Mr.
great.
Bernard Johnson, and I wanted to acknowledge him and go to our questions in our chat. And this one will go to Dr. Howard, Ms. Hitchens, and then Mrs. Thomas Searcy. The core idea that race is a social construct and that racism is not merely a product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in the legal system and policies. Do you believe critical race theory should be taught in public schools? Why or why not? Dr. Howard.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I'm happy that we're talking about critical race theory, at least for a moment, because we have to acknowledge that this seemingly new phenomenon that most of us were probably looking up to kind of see what in the world is going on here over the last couple of years, we have to recognize that this whole idea has been taken and changed. It's called concept creep, right? How you can have a definition of a thing, and then we have a political party and I guess a wing of a political party who has very strategically made sure that folks are putting everything that is considered scary in some social circles in and under this umbrella of critical race theory. Critical race theory is not in our K-12 education. What you're going to hear from me time and time again is that we have to teach history. Our curriculum already needed room, had a lot of room for improvement to better teach history, a more complete history. And we're moving in a backwards direction by not trusting our educators, by basically putting shackles and handcuffs on their ability to really have a nuanced conversation. That's what we have to get to. I'll give y'all an example. We all know Brown versus Board of Education, the 1954 Supreme Court decision. You know, this is something that our children learn in our K through 12 education. Now, what happens is that folks start getting a little nervous when you ask follow-up questions, when our bright minds in our classrooms ask questions like, well, how long did it take, say, Cobb County schools to integrate after the 1954 decision? Our teachers should be able to say, you know what, it took 11 years after the Supreme Court decision before Cobb County schools followed the law, after Atlanta Public Schools, after University of Georgia. And then we start having a conversation, well, how long did it take to integrate the teaching staff? What about the administrator staff? What about superintendent or board members levels? Now that's where folks start getting a little uncomfortable and start deciding that it's divisive. We have to make sure we're fighting against that. Yes, we're gonna follow the state law, but we're going to make sure that our children are understanding and learning history. So that's a small aside. We have to make sure our children learn history, period. Age-appropriate history. We have room to develop and get better with our curriculum.
Thank you,
and what
Dr.
we're not going
Howard.
to do is go down a CRT rabbit hole and completely miss the point that our kids really need to learn history and make sure we're reading on grade level along the way. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Thank you. Ms. Hitchens, the same question. The core idea that race is a social construct and that racism is not merely a product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in the legal systems and policies. Do you believe critical race theory should be taught in public schools? Why or why not?
So first, just like Jaha just said, of course, it's not being taught in public schools. Critical race theory is a law school level theory. It's not something that really kids are using. But I do think kids should be trained to use critical thinking skills in media literacy and all kinds of literacy, and looking at news, looking at problems in the world. They should use critical thinking skills. And that's basically what critical race theory is, except it's also applied to things that are happening historically, racially, and actually in current day. But I want to say that race is a social construct, but that doesn't mean it's not important. I actually have a biological anthropology background, so it is actually a social construct, but social constructs and culture, those kinds of things are so important. But biologically, humans are humans. There's not a lot of getting around that. It's just the truth. And when we think about what's happening, like what's really happening, because the words that are in the law are not critical race theory. They're saying divisive topics. We can't talk about divisive topics in classrooms. This is coming from across the country. We're not the only state that has this bill. So there are groups that are funding these very socially conservative, racist bills. And this is one of them. And they frame it as we're trying to make it so that, I guess, basically white kids don't feel bad about what's happened in the past, which is, I mean, come on, it's pretty ridiculous. No one's trying to make anybody feel bad, especially not children, feel bad about something that they had no control over. We just want to make sure that people know what has happened and what really is the basis of how our world exists today in the United States and specifically in Georgia. So I would say that most teachers want to make sure that kids do know the truth and learn what has happened in their history books and history, not just in the books, I'm sorry, because often you'll find that history books did not really teach you the truth. I didn't even think that sometimes things I learned were accurate when I was in high school, but I would research and figure them out. And I'm glad that I did that. But we need to make sure our kids are taught the truth all along and don't think that we're ever lying to them. And it's important for them to learn the truth, no matter how divisive it is, because that is how we can actually resolve issues. And I think, again, along the same lines of what I was saying earlier, that's exactly what this bill and many other bills are made to do, is to try to keep it so that people don't know the truth, don't know the real history, and these people who are in power can maintain that power. And that is, again, part of white supremacy. And we talked about this a little bit. Yes, it is all part of the structures, and there's structural racism in almost every part of every institution in Georgia. Not almost every institution in Georgia, basically. It's part of the foundation of those institutions, and we have to fight against it. And it's going to be difficult because, I'm just going to be honest, the Republicans, very conservative people, they're smart about it. They're not just out there saying, we are being racist. That's not what they're saying, but that's what they're doing. And we have to figure out how, as Democrats, to frame it in a better way, because the Republicans, the conservative folks, are kind of winning the framing game. We need to figure out how to make this be about what it's really about, which is us fighting for populations who need support, who are vulnerable, who are marginalized, and them trying to keep marginalizing those populations. So we need to reframe all of this debate to be about that. But we keep losing that, and we keep talking about critical race theory. And I know it's hard, and it's definitely not your fault at all. I'm not saying it's you, Dr. Vaughn. I'm just saying I do the same thing. Here we are talking about this again because they keep passing bills. But we need to try to change the frame. And if we take over the legislature and Democrats take over in Georgia, I think we can do that, at least in Georgia, and hopefully have it make a wave across the country.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Thomas Morgan. I mean, oops, Thomas Searcy. Don't get me in trouble. You're making a mistake. No, you wait.
Right, don't do it.
The court
No need to repeat it. It's okay.
Huh?
No need to repeat it.
Okay.
I don't believe CRT should be taught in schools in the way that it is a college course. I do believe that CRT, as in culturally relevant teaching, ought to be happening in our schools. Georgia students, the population of Georgia students is about 54% of color. And our curriculum ought to be reflective of the students that we serve. We ought to celebrate and embrace the diversity of the students that walk into our doors every single day. I think, as Jaha said, it's important to teach more history. We need students to understand the cultures that they've come from, the things that we've overcome as a human race. And I think that we have to trust both teachers and students. It broke my heart to hear teachers be afraid to teach what they have been trained to teach in social studies content for fear of losing funding for their entire district. That's not what teachers need to be worried about. I also think we ought to trust students who are old enough, middle, high school students, to have these important discussions, to understand the world that they're in, to understand that they can overcome these challenges, but also that sometimes laws and policies have to be challenged. And I'm proud of the young people across this country who have stood up and decided that they're going to fight for our rights and fight for our liberties and our freedoms. And so I think the classroom ought to be a place where that kind of discussion is welcomed, that they're getting accurate information, And I wish that topics like this would not be become so politicized. I think folks who come up with bills like this are usually they are lacking in ideas of how to improve public education. And so when you don't have ideas, you come up with distractions. And so I'm hoping that we can move forward from this and we can allow teachers to get back to teaching facts and history and empowering students so that they will have an education that's relevant and embraces who they are.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're going to come right back to you, Mrs. Thomas Searcy. On the issue of teacher pay, this is a question from one of our attendees, who we're all grateful that you're here tonight. On the issue of teacher pay, I've been told that we should be paid, and this is coming from a teacher, we should be paid like NBA superstars. Does Georgia's K through 12 teachers deserve to earn a six-figure salary?
Absolutely, they deserve it. Of course, the question is, can we afford it? One of the key pieces of my platform, and one of the reasons why I'm running for state school superintendent, is that I feel very strongly that teachers haven't had the voice that they deserve. I don't think that anybody's standing up and championing the voices of teachers. And one of their biggest concerns, we had a town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago with teachers from across the state, and they talked about the need for more pay, that they don't want to have to keep working a second or a third job to live. They don't want to have to get more loans just to get a master's degree so that they can earn more money. And so one of the things that we're working on in my campaign is how we can pay teachers a lot more. What I do know is that they absolutely deserve more than the national average. We have to find the right revenue source to pay them what they're worth. When it comes to NBA and NFL stars, though, I do believe that teachers ought to be recruited like NFL and NBA stars. We may not have millions of dollars to pay them, but we absolutely need to recruit the best and the brightest, the most talented teachers to come into Georgia's classrooms. And I think we ought to set up programs accordingly, because doing what we've done before and given what's happening in the pandemic, teachers are leaving our classrooms in droves. And if we don't rethink and reimagine how we recruit and retain teachers, and if we don't rethink what we're paying them, we are going to see ourselves in a serious crisis.
All right. Ms. Kitchens, the same questions. On the issue of teacher pay, we've heard that they should be paid, teachers should be paid like NBA superstars. Do Georgia's K through 12 teachers deserve to earn six-figure salaries? Why or why not?
I think, yes, they do, but I think that NBA superstars probably make more than that. But so I'm not sure the NBA superstars necessarily deserve the millions that they get, but there we go. I mean, it's something that people aspire to be, and people do watch it and make money. So then if they're making money for a franchise, that they definitely deserve the money, right? Anyway, so yeah, I think they do deserve a six-figure salary if we can possibly get there. And I think it definitely is possible. We have a surplus this year in our budgets, and we are basically, I'd say, at a deficit of teachers. I know a lot of areas don't have enough teachers, or they don't have enough substitute teachers. And so we definitely need to make sure we increase not only the number of teachers, but of course, the quality. Why not? Let's also make them better teachers. If we pay people more, we'll be drawing teachers from across the country. We'll be training and recruiting teachers within Georgia. I think that is going to be key to making sure, and it will also be making sure that we have good teachers in the public schools if we're paying them more, and respecting the teachers more, giving that we have to change laws that are taking away things from them, like in the classroom, being able to make decisions. We need the teachers to have that respect and authority back, because I don't think it's all about the pay. I do think we should pay them more, of course, but I also think we need to respect them more. And it's going to be something that the state's going to have to commit to. But in Georgia, we do spend most of our budget on education, but we're definitely not the state that spends the most on education or on teachers, like Alisha just said. So we definitely could pay our teachers more and bring more talent to Georgia and train more teachers in Georgia. We can definitely do that and pay them the six-figure salary. Maybe starting would be higher than that. And they should at least be paid in line with what other similarly educated people are making. If a person goes to law school for a similar amount of time as a person who becomes a teacher, then it seems like they should be paid a similar amount.
Thank you.
Mr. Vaughn.
Dr. Howard, same question to you.
Absolutely, our teachers deserve it. And as it was already said, I'm a business owner. At the end of the day, we also have to pay for it. We have to value our teachers in more than one way. We have to do it with pay. We also have to do it with respect. And we can't decide. Sometimes during a campaign year, we'll respect you with pay. And then other times we'll honor you with pay. And then other times we'll give you a banquet or award, but we're not respecting our educators. We have to make sure we do both. We have to make sure that we increase the pay and pay them the way that they should be paid, right? But we also have to make sure that we honor, that we respect, and that we listen to our educators. As we were formulating our platform and our priorities, we spent over a month in a listening phase of our campaign. I can't tell you how many Zoom meetings and person-to-person meetings I had with educators, with students, with superintendents from districts across the metro area and some other areas that are a little smaller districts as well. It's been consistent. It's been consistent. Pay was not the number one thing that people brought up. Over and over and over again, it was the lack of respect, the lack of support. I mean, you can probably ask almost any teacher in Cobb County, and I bet they would, although they of course love the money, love the extra pay that's coming from the state, that's coming from the district, but they would love to feel valued. They would love to feel heard. They would love to make sure that their input is really being considered. And again, that's an approach. It's excellence and compassion. And we're going to make that happen. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to ask 3 more questions, then I'm going to give you all your evening back. And we're going to start with Ms. Hitchens. And, while I may be sitting in Metro Atlanta right now, you'd be the superintendent, a school superintendent for the entire state. So let's ask a broader question that may apply to the rest of Georgia. Rural schools struggle to attract teachers, especially since urban and suburban districts pay more, even though we think it's not enough, right? Pay more. How do we get teachers into rural classrooms, including those with qualifications to teach things like special education, computer programming, and other specialties? Ms. Hitchens.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vaughn. Well, there are going to be a lot of things we need to do. And this is one thing that I would say, I actually saw Richard Woods actually just put out a message about trying to recruit rural teachers. And I would say that's excellent. I'm glad that's happening and that he's doing that. But I think we could do more. I think we need to train more paraprofessionals who are already living in the communities and find other folks who are living in the rural communities who want to be there to train them to be teachers as well. And even when the kids are in high school still, if they want to be teachers, here's a good time to help them. Oh, great. Make it exciting to be a teacher at your school. That would be great. You can come back exactly where you lived. You could teach here, help them get the training they need, get the schooling they need, and then come back to teach in their communities. Give teachers the same kind of loan forgiveness programs. I know they do have some loan forgiveness programs, but not necessarily tied to being in rural Georgia. So we could do that kind of program. I know doctors have that sort of program, I believe. I'm not sure about Dennis, Dr. Howard, but I know some doctors have programs where they get loan forgiveness for working in rural Georgia. I think that would be helpful also for teachers. Like, let's recruit teachers to come out here. And if they live out here for a few years and get their loans forgiven, maybe they'll stay because now they're part of that community. I think there are a lot of things we can do. And also, if we increase the pay across the state, we might bring in teachers from outside Georgia who want to live in rural areas to live in rural Georgia and teach there. So there are going to be a lot of things we're going to have to do. And of course, if we can bring them in like NBA All-Stars, that would be amazing. But that would also be something to do. We need to treat them like they're valued professionals and we want them here. And it's going to take a really big effort, I think, on all of Georgia to make this happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Howard, same question to you. Rural schools struggle to attract teachers, especially since urban and suburban districts pay more. How do you get teachers into rural classrooms, including those with qualifications to teach things like special education, computer programming, and other specialties?
Sure. I appreciate the question, and I appreciate Currey's response because I wholeheartedly agree with what you mentioned. And again, I am happy that Richard Woods has implemented some strategies to address this issue. This is a big deal. But guess what? Our solutions have to match the scope of the problem. And we have to make sure that we amplify these solutions in a better way. I'll also say that if you talk to HR professionals in the educational system, they'll say, hey, we can, we're doing this, we're doing that, but sometimes people just don't stay. And there's a problem with our educators sticking and staying because of, different reasons. But one thing that stands out is that our educators, just like other professions, they tend to like to be home. Folks tend to stick and stay when they have roots in that area. This is why, as a part of our platform, and that's to help develop from educators and administrators and students, is that we're going to have a pipeline program that will be able to go from high school students to help kids come back and teach back in their own hometown. Also, we have to be very intentional about the types of teachers, as you mentioned. There's some technology, there's some science classes. Also, when it comes to language, our Spanish speakers, our French speakers. And this is why, we started a scholarship program here in Cobb for Spanish speakers. We wanted to make sure we put our money where our mouth is. It's one thing to say we're going to do something, but we've been doing it. If I don't have the authority to make a school district do something, we're not a dictatorship, right? But there's still something that I can do. And as an individual, we were able to get that party started so that our students can start from high school and develop into educators as they move forward. So there's solutions out there, and we have to use all resources to make sure that we strengthen our educators network and our educator pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Thomas Searcy, same question to you.
I appreciate the responses that both Jaha and Currey gave, and I'll build on that and say a couple of additional things. I think we also have to think about the quality of life that teachers want to have if they're moving into a rural area. And so I would like to see partnerships with chambers of commerce, developers and others to help build communities so that teachers will want to come and raise a family and stay. We have to make sure we build the infrastructure. It's unacceptable, frankly, that we still have rural areas in our state that don't have access to broadband. So we have to think about those quality of life and access issues. There was a question in the chat about equity. Those are equity issues that we have to address and make sure that our rural areas are not forgotten. I also think we need to look at giving some flexibility to our rural districts when it comes to the requirements for hiring teachers. As much as I appreciate certification programs and the things that we require of teachers, sometimes we have to be flexible with who's able to come into the classroom and teach our students. We have a lot of individuals, when you think about things like computer science or the arts as an example, who are highly talented, highly capable of teaching those content areas. And I think it would make it easier to enter the classroom. In the interim, though, while we work on these longer term solutions, I also believe that we ought to use technology to make sure that students have access to coursework. So even if you don't have all of the teachers in those rural schools, giving them access to teachers in the urban areas or areas that are close to them so that they can have access to AP courses and honors courses. It's a serious issue across the state where students don't have enough access to those kinds of classes. And so I think we need to leverage technology to make sure that students have access to those opportunities while we also do everything we can to attract teachers to rural areas.
All right, thank you. So our next question talks about duration or time to impact. I'm looking for it. I'm sorry, I had it in front of me and something popped in and slid my, oh, here it is. We'll start with Ms. Thomas Searcy, Dr. Howard, then Currey, then we'll ask our last questions and go in reverse order. How long would it take you to improve conditions for all teachers who work in public? I want to ask a different questions. We're asking a lot of questions about the teachers. So how long will it take you to improve the conditions for all teachers and students who are in the public school systems in Georgia?
Ooh, that's a great and a hard question. And you gave it to the right one first. It's going to take a little while because it's going to take a little while to change the mindsets, and that's what it starts with. We got to change the mindsets on how we see teachers and educators in our education system. So that's one thing. In terms of students, and I said this at the very beginning, this is very personal for me. I have 3 school-age children, and I'm navigating schools along with my amazing retired state trooper husband, trying to make sure that schools work for our kids. So I think that there are some immediate things that we can do, and that's make sure that schools and school districts have the resources that they need. We think about something like equalization grants, which is a well-intended funding opportunity for districts that don't have as much of a tax base as some of our metro districts. But right now it's broken. We have metro districts that are getting money, equalization grants that probably shouldn't have it, while we have rural districts that aren't receiving the kinds of resources that they need. So a lot of our challenges can be addressed when we use the resources that we have to put in the right places. So that's making sure that we have strong school leaders in place. We have excellent, highly effective teachers and the support that they need to be successful. It's having counselors in schools who are actually counseling, and other mental health experts. It's having social workers. Sometimes we can't deal with education until we deal with the social issues that our babies are walking into schools with. And so those are things that we can do immediately. It's a matter of having the right state school superintendent who has a sense of urgency, who has the passion, who understands how to work in the legislative process to get things done, who understands how the budget works, how to read an allocation document when it comes to funding schools and districts, and who has the relationships with organizations across the state to build partnerships and serve our students directly. And so it's absolutely possible. It's not going to happen overnight. And it's absolutely going to take all of us, not just one person, not just educators. It's going to take the faith community, the business community. It's going to take young people. It's going to take all of us coming together, leveraging those resources and getting them to the places where they need to be.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Howard, same question. How long will it take you to improve conditions for all teachers and students who work in the public school system in Georgia?
All right, it's a great question. There are some things that we can address immediately, and that's respect. That's listening. Right away, immediately, our educators are going to know that they are heard. Our educators are going to know that they are continuing to be listened to. So that's immediately. Now, when it comes to building that infrastructure, that's something that may take some time. But here's something else that I've learned as a business owner and as a community leader, is that oftentimes great things are happening, but they're happening in pockets and they're happening in silos. And what we will do to accelerate that process is to make sure that we have a collaborative approach. And that's what we're going to do. We did it on a community level. We've done it as a school board, but no matter what the position is, we have work to do and we're going to get it done. As a business owner, folks are not used to seeing a pediatric dental office like our office. But guess what? When you have vision, when you work collaboratively and you have an imagination that's bigger than what people are used to, they may not be able to understand it right away, but I can sometimes show you better than I can tell you. So look at the track record. And I'm really excited about this panel. I'm excited about an opportunity to talk with you, but we have some things that are going to be changing immediately. And then, of course, we continue getting to the hard work to do those long-term changes. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hitchens, same question. How long will it take you to improve? I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure you understood the question.
I remember it.
You good?
I remember, yeah. Thank you, Dr.
Right.
Vernon. Well, I think it's not an easy question to answer because we can't really tell you how long it's going to take. I can change some things right away. And the thing I know I can change right away is that as a superintendent, I will not sit silently and allow things like laws to be passed that are racist. I will point them out and I will say what is wrong with them. And I will make sure that students know that it's not okay, that they're being bullied, that it's not okay, that this law is racist. So I think that students will right away feel more comfortable. I'm hoping teachers will also feel comfortable because they also probably feel these things and maybe are worried to say them sometimes because they don't want to lose their job. But I want the teachers to stand up for all the things that they know are wrong in schools and could be fixed, to help us break down the racism embedded in our school systems. And I want teachers to be a part of that solution, a part of fixing that problem, and the students also. And I think that will be something that on day one, I can make clear I want to hear from all the teachers and all the students across the state. And hopefully we can fight to pass the PRO Act so that won't get any teachers fired, but that's a problem. I'm sorry. Someone's talking, sorry. Maybe it's someone's sound is on. But anyway, so there's that. But the rest of the goals that I have, I think are not necessarily going to be as quick because I have to work with a Republican appointed Board of Education. So we're not always going to agree on everything, but I think we can get there if we start with issues like teacher pay, things that I think they will agree on, expanding broadband, things that we can work together to work on and get new policies in place. And I will also work right away to soften the blows of all of the laws that just passed that make it so that schools might lose their waivers if they teach, or if anyone in their school teaches about divisive concept. They don't lose money anymore. That got changed, but they might lose waivers that they have. Also kind of want the schools to have smaller classes though. So that's a aside. But anyway, because a waiver usually that schools get is to have a larger class. But anyway, so I will make sure that that blow is softened and that teachers and students are protected from that law and other laws that are harmful to them. And I'll fight to change those laws starting right away, and everyone will know it. I won't be silent about it, which is one problem that I have seen with our current superintendent. We haven't heard him say a single thing about how he feels about the bill to ban divisive concepts. I would think that he probably agrees with the bill because also the Board of Education last summer passed a resolution that basically said the same thing, and also said schools, you shouldn't be teaching about divisive concepts, and use some other wording. But of course, some schools said, no, we're still going to teach about race. We're still going to teach about this. And I think that's amazing. But what will they do now? There's been a bill that's passed. It's going to be a little harder, but I would right away step in and say, schools, you should feel comfortable teaching about these things because I'm going to have your back as much as I can and try to do the best I can to protect you, all schools, for teaching the truth in Georgia. Thank you, sir.
Outstanding. So as part of the next question, we're also going to include that as part of your closing comments for each candidate. But before we do that, again, I want to thank everybody for joining the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta for the first of our two candidate forums for state school superintendent. Next Thursday at 7 p.m., we'll have another forum for the Republican candidates in this primary. Again, early voting begins May 2nd. Election day is May 24th, and that's going to narrow down our pool, and then you'll have to come out again and vote in November, right? So we want to thank you all for participating on behalf of our president, Mr. Bernard Johnson, and all of the members of the 100 Black Men of North Metro. We want to thank you again for coming. We want to thank our panelists for joining us. And with their closing comments, please also answer this question. Considering that a lot of school decisions are made at the local level, what is it about you that makes you the best candidate for state school superintendent? We'll start with Ms. Hitchens, Dr. Howard, and then Mrs. Thomas Searcy.
Thank you again. I want to say thank you very much to the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta for having us here tonight. I really appreciate it. This is a great question to close on. I would say that probably the number one reason I'm going to be good at dealing with this, even though things are done on a local level, is that I'm really great at bringing people together. I can bring together and bridge a gap between Metro Atlanta, where I live now with my family and my two kids who go to public schools one in public school, one's not old enough yet. And then I lived and went to school in Whitfield County, which is a rural county in Northwest Georgia. I am uniquely qualified maybe to bridge this gap. I went to college here as well. I have friends across the state. I really want to bring all the communities in Georgia together. I think we can reach consensus on a lot of things across the state. I know we have differences, of course, but when we find models that work and we're trying different things in different schools and something works, then I want someone from Jaha Howard to come to Atlanta and see that and learn about that and try it out where they are. And then, vice versa. If there's something great happening there in South Georgia and West Georgia, wherever, we want to all work together and partner with each other. I want schools to all be good schools in Georgia, not just some schools be good schools. All schools need to be good schools. And we can do that by bringing all schools together and working together, not by making it a race against each other or a race for children against each other or schools against each other. That's not going to work, but we can all climb up higher if we work together.
Thank you. Thank you again. And Dr. Howard, same question to you. If you need me to repeat it, just let me know. If not, I'm gonna let you roll on.
I'll just make a couple of final comments. And that's that I'm excited about this opportunity to make sure that we're serving our children, serving our educators, and by extension, we're serving our entire community. We're at a very unique time, and in unique times, we need unique leadership. I wear a few hats, and those hats all give me a particular perspective, helps me to see the field a little more broadly. And in education, unfortunately, and career educators have shared this with me, we get tunnel vision. We get focused on doing it the way that we've been doing it, or we're so caught up in all the acronyms and we can quote this and quote that, and we quote how many years or decades we've been in education that we don't see how it connects to the broader ecosystem. There's one champion for public education that's your next state superintendent, and that's me, Dr. Jaha Howard. I look forward to working with you. When we agree, that's great. When we disagree, I look forward to learning, challenging one another, because ultimately our children are my only special interest. No strings attached. No strings attached. Our supporters just believe that we're going to be wise in our decision making and not with agendas. So I'm your candidate, and I look forward to your vote for Georgia State Superintendent.
All right. Mrs. Thomas Searcy.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughn, for your excellent moderation this evening. And thank you to the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta, and greetings to your president. And I want to thank everybody who's on here tonight. Some of you are supporters of the candidates. Some of you are here because you just want to hear from the candidates. And I hope tonight you see the importance of the job of state school superintendent. And I think it's valuable to have a pediatric dentist and a lawyer who have offered themselves to run for this seat. State school superintendent is a policy job. It's the chief cheerleader and champion for public schools in the state of Georgia. I'm the only candidate in this race who has experience at the state legislative level. I spent 12 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, on the Appropriations Committee, on the Education Committee, and the only one in this race who has actually passed laws at the state level and worked with the Department of Education to promulgate the rules for those laws. I'm also the only person in this race who has served as a superintendent and led schools. I'm an educator. I understand the challenges that educators are facing. I'm also a parent of 3 school-age children, so this is personal to me. We don't have 5 or 10 years to get this right. We only have right now. And the last thing I'd want to do is hire someone who doesn't have the experience to change the things that we need to change in education. I have the vision to reimagine public education in this state, and I have the experience to know what to do on day one. We don't have time to wait or hope that somebody gets it right or that somebody can figure out what to do. I only have right now, and so do our children. And so on May 24th, I am asking you to do what's best for children in this state, and that's vote for the candidate who has the experience, the passion, the dedication, the ideas, the vision, and the know-how to match the moment. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. And somebody just asked to be admitted. All right. Well, again, thank you all for attending this evening. We are very, very grateful to have Ms. Hitchens, Dr. Howard, Ms. Thomas Searcy, and I'd like to give regrets on behalf of Mr. Morrow. He was, sometimes we just have scheduling conflicts, but we respect that as well. But we want to thank everybody for taking a little bit over an hour, close to an hour and a half of your evening and spending it with us. There's any other number of other things you could have done this evening, but you chose to spend it with us, and we don't take that for granted. Again, thank you on behalf of the 100 Black Men of North Metro Atlanta. please go to our website, www.northmetro100.org, and you'll be able to see, or our Facebook page, North Metro 100 as well. And you can see information about upcoming events and next week's candidate forum, where we'll have the Republican candidates for state superintendent. Thank you again, everybody, and enjoy your evening.